Imagine you just had your best fundraising campaign ever and you raised $50,000. You hit your goal, but does that mean the campaign was actually a success? It depends. Like, what if it cost you $49,000 to raise that $50,000? Or what if 99% of the donors who participated never donated again after that? Questions like these are why it's important to pay attention to your fundraising metrics. These are key ways to measure your fundraising efforts that paint a bigger picture of how effectively you're actually raising money. Fundraising metrics can show you how well you're keeping donors around, how efficiently you're raising funds, and help you assess whether that fundraising campaign you did was actually worth all the trouble. In our 8th video in our Changemaker Cafe Fundraising 101 series, we will take a look at 4 key fundraising metrics to better understand the stories they tell us about our efforts to raise money and how to calculate our own progress. Don't forget, you can download our fundraising series action guide at changemakercafe.com. And as always, thank you to Click and Pledge for sponsoring this series. Ready? Let's get curious. Warning, watching Changemaker Cafe may lead to side effects such as caring a lot, an insatiable desire to help others, growing your skills to change the world, or becoming a leader in your community. For best results, use an open mind and share with all your friends. Okay, so there are dozens of indicators for fundraising effectiveness, efficiency, and progress. Far too many to cover in this one video. But that's why I want to focus on 4 in particular. And for each of these 4, I'll explain what the metric measures and why it matters. I'll share the formula for calculating that metric, and that way you can do the math yourself. Along the way, we're going to hear a few insights again from our fundraising expert friend, Dr. A.L. Fleming, whom we heard from in the first episode of our series. Let's jump right in. Okay, so let's say you have built up a huge audience on, say, Instagram or TikTok for your organization, but whenever you post about a need for donations, you hear crickets. What is going on here? The answer has to do with the fundraising metric known as the donor conversion rate. Put simply, the donor conversion rate measures what percent of your larger audience, that is, people who follow your organization on social media or visit your website, or maybe who are even on your mailing list, actually become real-life donors. When it comes to fundraising, your donor conversion rate is really important because a lot of traffic on your website or even a lot of followers on your social media pages don't really mean much if they don't follow up by donating or taking on some other kind of concrete action that supports your cause. And if you do have a lot of followers, but not a lot of people taking action, that could be a sign that something about your messaging or content isn't resonating enough to inspire people to take that next step.
If I had to pick the first metric or the number one metric, I would say it's the number of donors. You can have 10,000 followers, but if you only have 1,000 givers, something's not, translating. And so that's a whole another mechanism you have to put in place to convert those people to actual donors.
When you're running a fundraising campaign, an easy way to roughly calculate your donor conversion rate is to just divide your number of new donors by the number of followers, email subscribers, or other audience members you have where you've been sharing your fundraising messages. Then multiply that number by 100. For example, if 1,000 people visit your donation page, but 50 people give, then your conversion rate is 5%. Once you know your donor conversion rate, you can do a few things. First, you can take a look at which messages that you sent or which posts you made during your fundraising efforts, how they did. So did any of them get more clicks or donations than others? That could be a really great clue that those specific types of messages resonate really well with your audience, and that maybe you should try similar messages to that in the future. You can also consider strategies to grow your audience. So if you know that your donors usually convert at a rate of, say, 5%, then you could potentially estimate how many you'll acquire if you have twice or 3 times or 4 times the audience size. For this video's Changemaker Challenge, I'm curious, what are some types of messages, stories, or posts that you think would be the most successful in inspiring people in your audience to convert to being actual donors? I'm curious and I'd love to see your ideas, so feel free to share those in the comments. Now, what if you do a great job winning over new donors, but then the donors never return to give again? You can use the donor retention rate to understand this behavior and help inspire people, hopefully, to continue giving. The donor retention rate measures what percent of donors come back and donate again next year or year after year. For example, if you had 500 donors last year and 250 of those donors gave again this year, your donor retention rate would be 50%. In fact, that would be actually a pretty great rate because according to the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, donor retention rates for many nonprofits are usually around 40 to 45%. And that's not ideal because some estimate it costs 3 to 5 times more to acquire a new donor than to just retain an existing donor, which makes perfect sense. When someone donates, they're showing they like and trust your organization. And it's a lot easier to keep someone liking you than to try to get a new person to start liking you. When you know your donor retention rate, it can help you develop what's called a donor stewardship process or a donor pipeline. In other words, what systems and processes can you put in place to encourage your donors to stick around and keep giving year after year? And if you're lucky, maybe even increase their giving amounts too.
You can look at donor retention. How many donors are returning every year and growing to new levels of giving? And so we look at that as what we call the pipeline development process. Once you have a donor one time and they made an annual gift, which is just an initial gift, how do you move them across the spectrum from an annual gift to a major gift? And depending on the size of your organization, that number could be 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, or a million.
Practices like making sure you thank donors soon after they give, share your organization's impacts, and engage donors in ways beyond asking for money are all key. In fact, we'll talk more about donor motivations in the next video in our series, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Before we look at 2 more key fundraising metrics, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of our Fundraising 101 series, Click and Pledge. One easy way to track these fundraising metrics is with a powerful fundraising platform. Click and Pledge is a comprehensive platform for nonprofits to be able to do that while they're raising money and growing their impacts. They've got robust fundraising features, including your donation forms, in-person fundraising features. You can do text to give, peer-to-peer fundraising, which is great because then you can galvanize your supporters to go out and raise money for you. Video fundraising with donation links that are embedded directly in your video so they don't have to go somewhere else to donate. Donor outreach tools to improve donor retention, a Salesforce integration, a lot of other integrations, and a lot more features too. Some platforms charge more based on your organization's size, but Click and Pledge doesn't do that. They want to keep the pricing flat even as your donor list grows. There are no contracts and all of their solutions are included at no extra cost, so they're really great for organizations who are growing. Learn more about Click and Pledge's fundraising solutions, and you can get your first month free using the links that I'll leave below this video. You can always get in contact with their team if you have questions or you want to schedule a demo, or sign up to give it a try right now and get some hands-on experience. One metric in particular that is helpful for estimating how much you might be able to raise in a fundraiser is average gift size. The average gift size is pretty straightforward and it's exactly what it sounds like. So it's going to measure the average donation size across gifts made to your organization. And the formula to determine it is just as simple. You can calculate it for individual fundraising campaigns that you try or across a year or more of fundraising. For example, if you raise, say, $50,000 from 500 gifts, then doing the math there, your average gift size is $100. Knowing your average gift size can help you improve your fundraising in a bunch of different ways. For one, when paired with the number of donors you have overall, the average gift size metric can help you project your ability to reach your fundraising goals.
The number of donors, I think, too, is important. And I say that the number of donors in context to the amount of the average gift. So if you have 100 donors giving $1,000 a year, that's great. But if you have 50 donors giving $5,000 a year, that's even better.
Additionally, this metric can really help you with things like assessing average gifts for different fundraising methods. For example, perhaps you discover that fundraising through Facebook averages $10 donations, but through email, it averages $100 in donations. That's really helpful information for you to have. Knowing this can help you tailor your strategy across the different platforms that you use and share your fundraising on. Optimizing future fundraising requests is another way that this metric helps you. For example, if your average gift size is $100, you might try asking for $125 or $150 in future fundraising forms. And of course, it can also help you with segmenting donor groups. Let's say you have a group of donors giving small gifts averaging $25 a year, and another group that is averaging amounts of $500 per year. You can tailor communication to each group so that you might invite your small donors to become monthly givers, and then you might cultivate relationships with your larger donors to see if they might be interested in much larger gifts later on. The most important thing, though, to remember with this one is that giving people of all income levels opportunities to be generous, whether to them that means $1 or $1 million, it's a really worthwhile way to build community and relationships. Okay, so you remember how in the beginning of this video, I asked if your fundraiser raised $50,000, if you'd still be considered successful if you spent $49,000 to raise that amount. Well, the metric at the heart of this question is called cost per dollar raised. In other words, how much does it cost you to raise each dollar that you raise? If I could be nerdy enough to have a favorite fundraising metrics, I think this would be it, because it really helps you think about how some fundraising methods might not be a good return on investment after all, like our example of spending $49,000 to raise $50,000. Using our cost per dollar raised formula, we would quickly learn that it had cost us 98 cents to raise just $1. That is not an efficient fundraising campaign at all. Now, obviously, that's a made-up example, but it is true that some fundraising methods typically have a lower cost per dollar than others. Like in one analysis, the Association for Fundraising Professionals, AFP, calculated that it might cost 10 cents to raise $1 by trying to cultivate large donors to make major gifts, but it might cost 50 cents to raise $1 by hosting a fundraising event. Why is that? Well, it comes down to one thing that's not readily obvious in this formula. Some fundraising efforts take more time and resources than others. For example, it might take months worth of your time plus thousands of dollars to plan a major fundraising event. And even if you have volunteers giving their time unpaid to help you plan it, the time they spent planning an event might still have been more efficiently spent on other types of fundraising methods. Of course, every situation is unique, but understanding your own fundraising methods costs can really help you hone in on what is working most efficiently for your cause. At the end of the day, fundraising is a long-term effort that builds momentum over time. Being able to measure your success with these metrics can help you stay on track.
These are some of the top measures that I consider in my work, because as potential funders and current funders look at the overall success of the organization, they want to ensure that not only are you relying on their funds, but you're acquiring new donors, you're maintaining relationships with existing donors, and you're creating a long-range plan along with your annual planning to ensure the viability of the organization.
In the next video in our Fundraising 101 series, we'll take a journey into the hearts and minds of potential donors to understand why they donate or why they don't ate. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss it and other lessons in our series, and I'll see you for the next episode of Changemaker Cafe.